What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. I'm coming to you live from a hotel in West Virginia from a work trip. So I'm out of town this week, but we never let that stop us here on the podcast. But I do apologize if the audio is a little bit scratchy. Matt is coming on in just a minute, talk a little bit about the NBA, some updated standings, and a couple of interesting conversations I had this weekend that we wanted to really flush out on the podcast. So got that coming up. And then next week, we are kicking off our March Madness coverage with the March Madness preview that we do every year. And then a couple weeks of that before we get into April, which is going to be NFL draft season here on the podcast. So two of our favorite events coming up back to back here. And we're excited to get those pods going. But for now, Matt's coming on to do NBA. But let's go. Matt is here, and Matt, we got to finish the conversation we were just having in the pre-recording meeting. It was announced this week that Paul George is going to start his own podcast. You have any guess about what Paul George's podcast is going to be called?
Oh, well, you already told me that my guess of playoff P is incorrect, so I can only imagine how horrible it is.
You're so close. It's Podcast P.
Why? Why would a person do that?
Welcome to the podcasting game, Paul George with Podcast P. That I honestly I'm not even trying to be mean here. Do you give a single shit about what Paul George has to say about anything?
No. And I think anyone that does is a person that I don't care what they have to say.
I don't understand what the target market for Podcast P is in 2023. I mean, I get Draymond has a podcast that's very popular, but if nothing else, Draymond is entertaining or hyperbolic enough to have the First Take level audience following him. But as far as I know, Paul George is just boring as hell. I don't know what Paul George has ever done to make me want to listen to him on a podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like if people saw Fouled Out with Paul George as the interview guest, that they'd probably skip that episode. This is pretty boring.
What does he bring to the table?
I guess we'll have to listen to Podcast P to find out.
No. I don't think I will.
It's not worth it. Oh, man. Okay, well, good luck to Paul George. But
I think if someone told me, hey, you have to listen to Podcast P, or I'm going to shoot you with this gun, I would say, I hope you have a lot of bullets.
You're going to need them. But we did want to get together to talk about the NBA a little bit today. I mentioned in the preview that I had some interesting conversations this weekend while my power was out the entire weekend, thanks to DTE and Metro Detroit, about the NBA. And there's a couple things I wanted to flesh out with you. But before we get there, we got to talk about the big drama that's going on in the NBA right now. And I hate to lead off a podcast with this, and I hate that we even have to do this segment on a podcast, but we have to talk about Memphis Grizzlies point guard Ja Morant and everything that he's going through, because this has now gotten beyond an isolated incident, and we're now at weeks and weeks and maybe even over a month of different reports coming out of him threatening people with guns and making all sorts of very poor decisions for a star NBA player.
At what point do you stop and think, how can I help myself? Because the things that are reportedly continually happening with this kid are things that would never really cross my mind to do at any point in time. And I've had a pretty bad anger problem in my life. So why? Like, I know that street cred for a lot of young players when they come into the league is a really, really big thing, and they kind of go over the top with some of that stuff. But dude, at some point, recognize that you have hundreds of millions of dollars ahead of you, and you are potentially flushing all of that away if you don't get on the right track.
Yeah, so we don't have to list the entire series of events that have led us to this point, but the latest and maybe the dumbest thing on the list is that he posted a Instagram live story over the weekend of him dancing at a strip club with a gun in his waistband.
Yep.
And it's resulted in a statement from the team basically saying that he's taking a break from being with the team in order to get the help that he needs. And initially it was a 2-game break. Now we don't really know. It's an undefined amount of time before he's going to be back. On a side note, the NBA is also investigating where he's been with that gun and how that gun got there, because any presence of a gun at a team facility is an automatic 50-game suspension. So he's looking, I mean, no pun intended, but he's looking down the barrel of something potentially a lot more serious than taking 2 games away from the team to get the help that he needs.
We all thought that these players had all learned from the mistake that Gilbert Arenas made, which was swiftly and severely punished, as it probably should have been, right? God, like, it would not surprise me if that is substantiated.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the timeline of events, he was playing in an NBA game, and then he was at a strip club that's pretty far away from the arena that he was playing in with a gun, not that long after the game was over. So the potential for it to have been in a car in an NBA arena or in his locker or really anywhere is pretty high. And if they do figure out that's what happened, then we're looking at a massive suspension with only about 18 to 20 games before playoffs.
Yeah.
And when you have guys like Gilbert Arenas and Plaxico Burress coming out and being like, dude, please learn from my mistakes, that it's getting pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's not worth it. Like, you can responsibly enjoy your firearm in appropriate places in your free time. People should not see you posting it on social media in public places.
Yeah, I thought the reaction to this has been really interesting. And I think that we do this as like, not us specifically, but as a sports media in general, that for some reason there are players who we decide that we like or we don't like, and that the treatment is very different because people are all pulling for Ja Morant and rooting for him to get the help he needs and get back and be ready for the playoffs and all of that. Where like we've seen guys become pariahs from different sports leagues for doing like much less than what Ja's alleged to have done. Why do you think that like certain guys get this kind of like easier path where everybody's like, oh, we're really rooting for you, and other guys kind of do less, and it's like, okay, well, that guy's just a team cancer at this point?
Part of its value, right? I mean, Ja Morant is a very, very valuable asset, not just to the Memphis Grizzlies, but also to the NBA. Like, that is certainly part of it. And as fans, it's like, he's fun. He's young. Like, you don't want to hate that, right? You want to see him be successful and watch him for 15 plus years, because that makes what you are watching better. the flip side is like you have, let's look at the NFL for, an example. Vontez Burfict, he was just a guy that, his issues were on the field, right? And you can argue that that is not as bad as some of the stuff that we're talking about with Ja Morant. And he became a guy that it was really easy for kind of just about everyone to kind of love to hate. And I think that's also an aspect that, like, sometimes people are just kind of looking for that person that you love to hate. Rick Mahorn, back in the old days with the Pistons, was a guy everyone loved to hate. Bill Laimbeer, same shit. But at the end of the day, it's like there's a threshold. And I'm a guy who really liked Ja coming out of college. I still really like his game. I think he is one of the most fun players to watch, and he still has a ton of potential ahead of him. And I want to see him succeed. And I think he's been a complete and total idiot. And if he brought a firearm into an NBA facility, I want him to get that full suspension. Because if he doesn't, he's never going to learn. And eventually he's going to end up shooting someone else or shooting himself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of it has to do with advertising dollars as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of significant NBA sponsors and a lot of significant sportswear companies that have heavy investments in Ja Morant.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if, like, he's a Nike athlete and Nike has this huge campaign planned for him. And he's so young, and they're like, okay, this is someone we're going to use in our advertising for the next 10 to 15 years because kids love him. They buy his jersey. People really like him. I do wonder if Nike, or like, using them as an example, if they're calling into like these sports shows and like they have people communicating, being like, hey, like maybe take it easy on our guy for the gun thing. Like, don't hammer him too much and turn public perception against him too much because, we kind of need him for the next couple of years. So it'd be interesting, but yeah, it's just some guys get treated so much differently than what we're seeing with Ja right now. But I do hope that he's able to turn it around because, like you said, he's a really fun player to watch, and the NBA is more fun when he's out there doing his thing. Even if the Memphis Grizzlies are only a half game ahead of the Kings for the second seed right now, and I would really like to see us pass them.
Yeah, and look, in fairness, God, he's like what, 21, 22 now? If that.
Yeah, but he's still early 20s.
Yeah. Obviously, I didn't have any of these issues when I was that age because I've never owned a firearm, mostly because I don't want that responsibility. It scares me. But like, we did a lot of really dumb shit when we were that age. And not to give him a pass, but it's not like there's not the potential for him to like look in the mirror, take this seriously, learn from it, try to be a better person, and move on. Like, that's a very real possibility, and I hope that is the path that he chooses to take. I am a little bit cynical, not necessarily because of anything that I've seen from Ja Morant, more so because that is typically not what you see from athletes in these situations. They'll say the right things when they come back and all that stuff, but stuff always creeps back up, right? It just it's never the last mistake, it feels like.
Yeah, I'm more concerned because you just said that you didn't have any problems like this when you were that age. Do you not remember being part of my 9-man posse that rolled into the mall to threaten 17-year-old Finish Line employees?
Well, I was never sober enough to possibly remember it, so
Very fair. And for people who don't know, that's what part of what Ja Morant allegedly did was show up with 8 of his closest buddies to go and threaten someone who had gotten an argument with his mom at Finish Line. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here. But
finish line. Not
let's
even
move on
Foot
to
Locker. Finish line.
Finish Line. Let's move on to more fun NBA conversations, because this is like a bummer that we even have to talk about this in the first place.
Yeah.
But so my power was out this weekend for the whole weekend because we had another ice storm in Metro Detroit.
Naturally.
So I was staying at my parents' house with my very smart and very wise father, who's a great man. I know he's listening to this. So we were talking about a couple of things in the NBA this weekend. So 2 kind of conversations I wanted to have with you on here. The first one, the Philadelphia 76ers beat the Milwaukee Bucks over the weekend, ending their 14-game win streak. The Knicks beat the Celtics twice in the past week as well. And it got me thinking, we've been really excited about a potential Celtics Bucks Eastern Conference Finals.
Yep.
But if that doesn't come to pass, like, it's still probably the most likely scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
But if that doesn't come to pass, which lower seeded team in the Eastern Conference do you think is going to break up our party? Like, who's going to come and like rain on our parade and prevent this awesome series that we're looking forward to?
So I have 2 candidates here. One of them is going to be much less surprising than the other, I would say. That one's going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. I just think that we have seen historically the level that Donovan Mitchell is able to play at in the postseason is so high that, I mean, that instantly already gives your team a chance. And then you add in the fact that they have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley anchoring that defense together. And I mean, let's call it what it is. If you're going to beat either of these teams in the playoffs, you need to play some really good defense. Like, that's a really, like, they've got such a huge advantage over just about every other team in that area because they have guys who can do stuff on defense that these other teams just can't. I'm not going to bet on them because those teams are so good, but shit, I will never count Donovan Mitchell out in the playoffs.
Yeah, this is such a hard conversation to have in the first place because it's like, God, can anybody really beat either of these teams in a 7-game series?
But and seeding isn't even finalized either, so like we don't know matchups yet.
Yeah, I actually like Cleveland as a matchup more against the Bucks than I do against the Celtics.
I would agree.
Because it's going to be really tough. I mean, yeah, Cleveland has great defense with Mobley and Jared Allen on the inside, but I feel like that's a better weapon against Giannis than it is against Tatum and Brown.
Yes, but I will say the caveat to that is that, look, both of those guys are going to try to get a certain amount of their points by running to the rim. So it's still very helpful there. And another area where it's really, really important is like, if you can command the rebounding category, then that's another massive advantage. So, I mean, if they're one shot and they're done, and you can lock that down just about every possession, like, Yeah, you're gonna have a really good shot to win that game.
Do you know what other situation it's really helpful to have Evan Mobley in?
Well, I would say most situations.
Every situation. Evan Mobley's awesome.
Yeah, he is. You know what's weird is like, obviously he was my like breakout pick player, and while his stats aren't like mind blowing, like you look at who else is on that team and how much like demand there is for the ball, and it's like, nope, actually that's still really impressive.
Yeah, he does a lot of things that don't show up on the stat sheet as well.
Yep.
But can I guess who your other team is?
Yes.
I'm gonna guess that you're gonna pick the Miami Heat.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Because
saw this
you
one
never
coming
count
because
out Jimmy Butler.
I was gonna say I saw that coming
Yeah.
because we have
I
similar
also,
mindset on this.
yeah. And I look at these other teams too, like, I mean, I'm not picking Philly.
No, that's my notes literally say Philly gonna Philly.
Yeah. I'm just not buying New York in the playoffs. Maybe their current roster will allow Julius Randle to be less of a negative in the playoffs, but we've just seen it go south so quickly every time they get there.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's funny that you say that because I did notes for every team in the East.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so on the same page with this because I think the Knicks are really interesting, especially with how well they've played since acquiring Josh Hart and like the thing Josh Hart's been able to do.
Dude, it quickly has been amazing.
They have a lot of really good guys, especially if RJ Barrett is playing well, like he did against the Celtics the other day. But I need to see more from Julius Randle in the playoffs.
Yep.
He was so awful against the Hawks a couple of years ago that it's impossible for me to pick the Knicks if they're relying on that guy. Like I need to see it first. And I don't mind being late on that if he's awesome in the playoffs this year.
Right. Then I look at Brooklyn, it's just like we talked about this via text. Right now their roster is not a playoff roster. They know that. I appreciate the scrappiness that they are going to bring, and I think they'll probably still take a game or two if they, don't fall down into the play-in, but they're just not a threat. And then Atlanta, well, that's a joke. Toronto, hell no. Washington, hell no.
Yeah, I think the Cavs is probably the easy answer with the amount of talent they have on that team. The Heat, like you said, I mean, any team with Jimmy Butler, and then also you throw Bam Adebayo in there.
Yeah.
The concern with the Heat are 30th in offense. They're 30th in points per game and 30th in field goal percentage, and they're in the low 20s in almost every offensive efficiency category as well as true shooting. But I'm still scared of any team that has Jimmy Butler on it.
It'd be like that. I do like that they picked up Kevin Love though. I think him being fresh, while yes, certainly not being the player he once was, just his experience, being able to be on the floor and make the right decisions and in really important moments does help them in the postseason quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially because they were starting Caleb Martin at power forward before that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, their roster outside of those two is, especially when they have guys who keep getting injured, it's just, it leaves something to be desired for sure.
Yeah, can we talk about like how the Duncan Robinson thing is like one of the weirdest contract
Yes.
situations in the NBA real quick, because like this dude was a dude who's like hitting like a really high clip from three. He signs a massive deal and then instantly is completely unplayable in
Yeah.
NBA games. Like
Yeah.
I don't get that. He was hitting like 45% from three on 8 threes per game. Now he doesn't even play more than 17 minutes.
It blows my mind. I mean, like, did he just get the yips? Like, is that what happened? And he just never recovered?
Yeah, I mean he's shooting okay. I guess
He's
not. Like
under 40% from the floor. He's not shooting okay.
no. So this is his 3-point percentage the last couple of years. 45% on 8.3 3-pointers per game, 41% on 8.5 threes, 37% on 8 threes, and now 33% on 5 threes per game. Like it seems,
Yeah.
3-point shooting has just gotten worse every single season, and he can't play defense, so he's unplayable. You know what it kind of reminds me of, and this is going to be the weirdest comparison in the history of this podcast.
Oh.
It reminds me of Roy Hibbert, because for
Oof.
like 2 solid seasons,
Yeah.
he was like a force with Indiana.
Yeah.
And then he comes back the third year and he's like literally completely unplayable for the Pacers, especially in a playoff game.
Yeah. He was that untouchable asset that quickly became a player that you can't move anywhere.
Yeah, he was like out of the league. Not that like
Yeah.
he was in an Eastern Conference Finals giving the Miami Heat with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade the hell. And then like 2 years later, he's not even in China playing basketball. Like he's just completely gone. It was stunning.
Yeah.
But so I think we're on the same page. Probably the Cavs is probably the party crashing team.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say about Philly is like they do have Joel Embiid. And I know that they're relying a lot on James Harden in the playoffs, which is never a good idea. But,
Yeah.
you know, if we're talking about who the best players in the East are, it's probably Giannis and then Embiid. So in a game against the Celtics, like I'm going to say that Philly has the best player on the floor. And that gives you a chance to win anytime that you have that advantage.
I hear that. My thing is I need to see him come up big in the big moments in the playoffs. And to this point in his career, he has not been able to do that. Now, granted, that's not entirely on him, and it's definitely more difficult when you are playing center. But I would argue that the way you do that at center means that you need to come through and dominate early in those games so that you don't have to rely on other people to get you the shot at the end to make the last shot. And
yeah, and I agree that
happened.
we need to. Yeah, I agree we need to see more of it. But, you know, if we're just talking about like players in the league who can get hot and win you a series you're not supposed to win,
right?
I could see him be dominating a series and getting Philly a win that they're not supposed to get. He's just that good.
He's got the talent to do it. I'm not knocking that. I will say he's kind of at that point that we were with Tatum last year going into the playoffs. It's like, yeah, we know what you can do, but we need to see you do this for an entire series to lift your team up and get the win when you're not supposed to, because if you don't, then you're just going to continually be that locked and loaded second round out.
Yeah, that's the key here too, is against a team that you're not supposed to beat, because they're going to like play the Nets in the first round and he's going to have a tremendous 4 games when they kick the Nets out. And Philly fans are going to be on here, be like, "Oh, we told you he could do it." It's like, no, I need to see it against one of these higher seeded teams. But so the other conversation I had this weekend that I thought was interesting and kind of has to do with Joel Embiid actually is that I think that this might be the first time in NBA history that an all-star team comprised of international players could potentially beat a all-star team comprised of players from the USA. So I laid this little thought experiment out for Matt that you got to pick a team of 8 guys. And I picked 8 because that's typically like playoff basketball. You start cutting your rotations down. You start playing like your best 8 players. You're not going like 12 deep in a 7-game series typically.
Right.
And we had to pick a international team and a Team USA. Where we talk about the selection criteria that we each had and kind of who you think could win. I honestly, I put my 2 teams together and I was like, this is so close that I don't know 100% who would win, but I wanted to get your take on it. So we could tackle this however you want. If you want to start running down who your teams were or like what spots you had.
Do we want to like share our USA teams first and then we can do internationals and then we can give our verdicts?
Yeah, let's both go with our Team USA first. So you do yours first, and then I'll tell you how mine's different. So we picked the starting lineup, and then the 3 bench players were supposed to be a guard, a wing, and a center, or a guard, a wing, and a big.
I'll start out with my guards. Obviously, I'm taking Steph. If I don't, that's GM malpractice. And then I'm gonna pair him up with Donovan Mitchell. Honestly, kind of hard to think of a better 2 guard right now. I mean, just in general, really. Like, he's got to be number 1, I would think.
Yeah, my team construction is a little different, which is it's going to be interesting. But when you looked at that, did you instantly go to Donovan Mitchell, or did you have an argument between Mitchell and Booker?
No, I went Mitchell just because I have seen him like put up 30-point triple doubles in a playoff game. If you're talking about like figuring out who is the better team, then I feel like you need to find guys that have displayed their ability to elevate their game and elevate their team in key moments. So that is kind of what differentiated him to me. Not to say that Booker has not performed in the playoffs. It's just, and there's more I want to see. Some of the peak performances there are maybe in more welcoming situations. I mean, he's certainly like achieved more success in the postseason than Donovan Mitchell has, but that all kind of came after they got Chris Paul. So there's a little something there to that. And I think Chris Paul has actually genuinely made him a better player too. I don't want to take that away from him. I went with Jason Tatum at the 3 for me. He just such a good scorer. Like I just don't think that you pass up that opportunity, and he's really added some playmaking to his game over the last few years, and it's become a pretty good rebounder too. And then I'm putting LeBron at the 4, which I know is a little bit unconventional, but I think that is the way that he should be played. I think he is a great stretch 4 who can also be a ball handler.
I'm just glad LeBron's in the starting lineup.
No,
I didn't know where we were gonna go when he wasn't the 3.
How strongly were you expecting him to not be in the starting lineup?
I had it at like 60-40 that he was on your bench. And I had a small bet on the fact that he wasn't going to be on your team at all.
Yeah.
Just small, because I didn't hate the odds, but I didn't think it was going to happen.
My 5 spot was a little tough for me to make a decision on. I think I'm going Bam Adebayo.
I looked this up yesterday because I wanted to use Bam Adebayo as well. He was born in Newark, New Jersey.
Okay. So my guard on my bench, it should be obvious to everyone that has listened to this podcast. Damian Lillard.
Mm-hmm.
I got Jimmy Butler as my wing on the bench. The bigs are honestly like the hard part.
This was the thing that was very difficult about the USA team that was very, very easy to me about the international team.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I feel like you have a glaring hole in your team USA.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'll tell you how I circumvented this situation, but
it's kind of a hard thought experiment to do as well. Miles Turner? I'll take Miles Turner.
Fair. I had Anthony Davis.
Oh my god. Okay, but like he's gonna get hurt after like the second play.
Probably, but I'd still rather have like half a game of Anthony Davis than Miles Turner.
I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot about Anthony Davis because I just assume he's never going to play.
Yeah, you completely forgot about someone else too. So I went with more of like a positionless basketball approach to this.
Oh shit, Kevin Durant too. Yeah, so
yeah, let me tell you how I laid this out because I think that you'll agree with my team. I have Curry at the 1.
Yeah.
And then I went positionless basketball and I said LeBron James, Jason Tatum, and Kevin Durant all in the starting lineup.
Yep.
Wings, guys who can handle, shoot, you can move the ball. Bam Adebayo at the 5.
Yeah.
Bench,
I like that.
Bench we're extremely similar. I went Dame, Jimmy Butler, and Anthony Davis. The one change I thought about making was who would I rather have in a playoff scenario, Jimmy Butler or Kawhi Leonard? I feel like most people would probably pick Kawhi Leonard, but goddamn, when it's nut crunching time, I don't know if I would really rather have anybody than Jimmy Butler on my team. It's so hard for me to say I'd rather have someone than Jimmy Butler, so I went Jimmy at the wing.
I have been as big on Kawhi Leonard as anyone. I mean, there was a long, like several years in a row where he was locked in as my number 1 player in the NBA. I wasn't hearing other conversations. I didn't want to hear Kevin Durant. I didn't want to hear LeBron. But we haven't seen the Kawhi Leonard that took Toronto to an NBA championship since he did that. And I don't know what that change has been. Maybe it's mental. I don't know. But for me to believe that that is still there, I really need to see him really take it to someone in the playoffs again.
Yeah, this was my main thing here is like just if I'm looking across the aisle in a playoff series, who am I more afraid of?
Yeah.
I think there are very few guys that I'm more afraid of than Jimmy Butler. Like we just saw it last season. He had an undermanned Heat team and took the Celtics all the way to the edge.
Yeah.
All the way. And honestly was like one shot away from going to the finals against the Warriors, and then who knows?
Right.
So I think that's the team that we should go with for Team USA. It's Steph, LeBron, Tatum, KD, and Bam starting, Dame, Jimmy, and AD on the bench. Let me
Yeah.
give you my international team. This was hard because I feel like there's a log jam in the front court that you have to clear up.
Yeah. They had opposite problems. Like the guards were kind of the problem for
It's like wings
international.
in
Yeah.
yeah, it's like wings in the US, and then in international it's bigs.
Yeah.
So I went Luca at the 1, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander at the 2.
Yep.
Shea is from Canada, so he counts. This is where it started getting hard because I thought about going Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid in the starting lineup. I ended up settling on Pascal Siakam at the 3, Giannis at the 4, and then Jokic at the 5, which pushes Embiid to the bench. And I have Embiid on the bench with Domantas Sabonis. And this might be a hot take because I feel like people would expect the backup guard to be Jamal Murray, who's also from Canada. I went Josh Giddey as my backup guard. And I don't have a ton of like analysis to back that up because Jamal Murray might be a better player at this point. But I was thinking about like what I'm going to need on this team as a backup. And you're going to have a lot of dudes on this squad like Luka and Embiid and Giannis who are all going to want the ball.
You need ball
So I'm like,
movement. You don't need
yeah,
someone who's going to try and score themselves. You need ball movement.
yeah. And I'm also not sure if Jamal Murray is better than Bones Highland. And I know Josh Giddey is.
I was gonna, you beat me to it. I was gonna say if Bones Highland can actually take digs at you, then like, yeah, Josh Giddey might be better than you.
Yeah, I like Josh Giddey's game a lot from like a
Yeah.
just an overall perspective, and then I want to distribute. I want more I want more distribution on this team.
Yep. Totally agree.
So, any qualms with that? Do we go with Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic all in the starting lineup at the same time, or is that too much beef?
You know, I don't often say there's too much beef, but I think that would be too much beef.
I was thinking of like if you're trying to guard all these wings on the US, I think you have to have someone more like a Siakam in there.
Yeah.
Like Siakam, Shea, and Giannis, I think gives me a better chance against LeBron, Tatum, and KD. I don't want like Embiid and Jokic trying to guard KD.
Yeah. I mean, you need guys in there that are going to be switchable.
Yeah, so like one at a time. Embiid and Jokic on the floor.
Yeah. And Giannis just never leaves. He's not allowed.
Yeah, so there's so much talent on. Or hold on, did you have any qualms with that international team? Would you change anybody out, or you want to change the lineup?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I can't think of, I mean, obviously like the front court, you're really not going to beat that. And I can't think of any guards that would really need to be switched in there.
I think this is like super close. So I think I would still lean Team USA because of all the shooting.
Yeah.
But really, I laid this out to say like LeBron James and Steph Curry are like the faces of the NBA right now.
Yeah.
Closely followed by guys like Kevin Durant. But we are not far away from all of those guys being out of the league.
Yep.
And so, like, if we're looking at the younger dudes on this list, you have Tatum for USA, but not much else. So, with the Ja situation that we talked about earlier in this podcast, like, I would think, like, if you're looking at who's going to be the face of USA basketball in the future, like, you're pretty much looking at someone like Tatum or like Ja or an Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
Where for international basketball for years to come, we're going to have Luka, Giannis, Embiid still pretty young, Jokic. Like, we may be looking at a very real scenario in the not too distant future where the top 5 guys in the NBA are all international stars. Like, even if you go back to our latest list that we did before last season of like the top 30 players in the NBA, we had Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid all in the top 5 already. And now you have like KD and Curry who are getting to the ends of their prime and like soon the end of their careers. Like, who takes over as the face of the NBA? I think it's just a super interesting thing to think about where like all the like all the top 5 guys are going to be international guys. And then the face of USA basketball is like Devin Booker and Jason Tatum. And like the best player in the NBA is not an American.
It's been quite a revolution, because it was not that long ago that a lot of fans were constantly screaming, "Don't draft international guys because they never work out." That hasn't really panned out.
Well, we didn't even mention that, we talked about this multiple times on the podcast, but the top pick in the draft this year is going to be French.
Yep.
Like Wembanyama is French. So
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Like, there's always been great international players in the NBA as long as we've been watching. Like, you can go, Dirk, Manu, Tony Parker, Yao Ming, the Gasol brothers. You keep going back, Hakeem Olajuwon, other guys, but like you could never fill out a roster of international all-stars like you can nowadays and say like, damn, that's a team that could challenge anything that the USA could put together.
Right.
And like, granted, the US is still the best basketball country in the world because all of these guys are all from different countries on the international team. But it's just super cool how far international basketball has come. It's a really cool thing to see. And I'm glad that we have such a diverse array of NBA superstars to root for.
I think like big picture also, it just drives the development of players' games forward even further, because there is that element of, well, overseas basketball is actually really good, right? If you don't get to go to that big dream school that you really want to go to, you can go play overseas for a year or two. And, like, develop your game and come back in the draft a significantly improved player to reach that dream that you set, right?
Yeah, I think international basketball is only getting better and better as well. Like we talked about this during the Olympics, is that like some of the foreign teams can kind of hang with the US for a little bit, even though, the US maybe isn't taking it super seriously, but like, it's just different from like the 90s where there was not even a single chance to compete.
Yeah.
So I like where we're going as a global game. I like that the league is a little bit more global flavor to it and that we have some kind of fun guys from all over the world to root for. It's pretty cool. And it's going to inspire international basketball to only get better.
For sure.
But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt, big events coming up for the podcast starting next week. We are diving into March Madness for 3 weeks to cover the tournament. And then April, our favorite month of the year. The entire month is going to be NFL draft coverage.
Obviously, May is the start of the dead period. So we can't forget our collaboration with Podcast P.
The lost episodes. Yeah, then once we get through NFL draft season, we'll start coming up on NBA playoffs. We'll have fan favorites like Devin and Clint back on. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up, but March Madness next week. I am looking forward to it.
Yep. That'll be fun.
All right. I will see you soon, my friend.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye, Mom.